Hello everyone, welcome to our channel EDU to Psychology, a dedicated channel meant for seekers who are interested in the subject of psychology. It is for everyone and anyone who is willing to learn, understand and enhance their subject knowledge. Welcome to our lecture 2. Now we have come across from lecture 1 that psychology is a scientific study of behavior and cognitive process. Now, by saying cognitive means the mental process. We now also know that the nature and characteristics of behavior. However, behavior is studied by other academic disciplines too. So, which aspect of behavior are the concerns of psychology? Also, what is the relationship of psychology with other academic disciplines? You might have heard people using the term psychiatrist, psychologist, counselors, etc. But many of them perhaps do not know the difference between them. Many of them also do not know as to where do psychologists work. They think psychologists mainly work in mental hospitals to treat abnormal, insane people, or maybe teaching psychology at schools and colleges and universities. Well, certainly, these are the places where psychologists work. There are many other areas too where knowledge of psychology is applied. Now, in this lecture, we will find answers to these questions. We will also come to know about the various branches of psychology and a wide range of fields where psychologists apply the principle of psychology. They try to solve a variety of human problems or to improve the quality of life. So let us begin. Now the topics we are going to cover in this lecture are branches of psychology, psychology and other disciplines, psychologists at work. Now, as we understand, psychologists help people lead a fuller and happier life by promoting or enhancing their psychological health. Psychologists also cure and help in prevention of various psychological and emotional problems, or we may say behavior disorders. Now, we have also learned from lecture 1 that psychology as a behavior science shares common characteristics with other physical and biological sciences. All sciences have practical application to deal with human problems and improve their quality of life. Let's say engineering and technology have developed from results of physics, chemistry, and mathematics, and they have made life easier and comfortable definitely. Similarly, medical sciences have contributed significantly not only fight and control deadly disease, but also cure, prevent many diseases. Psychologists have also developed a number of techniques to help people lead a fuller and happier life by promoting, enhancing their psychological health. Psychologists also cure and help in prevention of various psychological and emotional problems. Sometimes, the words problems such as climate change, pollution, aftermath of natural disaster, man-made disease or man-made disasters, say like in today's time COVID, are so widespread and serious that no one or two sciences can solve such problems. A group of scientists from different fields have to therefore come together to jointly handle such problems. This is known as transactionalism, which we will discuss later on. Due to the interaction of the results of different disciplines, new fields of knowledge have emerged. Now, thus, no particular field of science cannot be completely isolated from other fields of science, and different fields of scientific knowledge are quite closely related. Development in one particular science or sometimes more than one discipline have influenced the development in other sciences. Now, it is clear that though psychology has emerged as an independent field of scientific inquiry, nevertheless, it has very close relationship with other sciences. In fact, the emergence of psychology as a science was possible because of developments in other sciences like genetics, physiology, neurology, medicine, physics, chemistry, sociology, anthropology, and other sciences. Its methods of inquiry and analysis as well as application have all been influenced by development in other sciences. Of course, development in psychology have in turn influenced the growth and development of other disciplines like sociology, economics, politics science, etc. Now, it is obvious that even though we cannot think of different fields of scientific knowledge, the fact is that these fields depend on their expansion on the finding of other disciplines. Perhaps this will become clearer if we can examine in some detail the relationship of psychology with certain other sciences. And now for this purpose, we group the other sciences into different categories like biological sciences, physical science, medical sciences, social sciences. Now, as we are here to discuss the first topic of the lecture, that is the branch of psychology. Now, I'll quickly take you through the branches here. First is your cognitive psychology. Second is biological psychology, then neuropsychology, developmental psychology, social psychology, cross-culture and cultural psychology, environmental psychology, health psychology, clinical counseling psychology, industrial or organizational psychology, educational psychology, sports psychology, other emerging branches of psychology, and positive psychology. Don't worry, we'll take you through these branches one by one. Now, let's talk about what is cognitive psychology. As you can see here, these are the basic aspects of cognitive psychology. Now, what is cognitive psychology? Basically, cognitive psychology investigates mental process involved in transition, acquisition, storage, manipulation, and transformation of information received from the environment along with its use in communication. Now, major cognitive processes are, as we mentioned here, attention, perception, memory, reasoning, human intelligence, decision making, and language. Now, we will be studying these topics later on in other lecture. Now, in order to study these cognitive processes, psychologists conduct experiments in laboratory settings. Some of them also follow an ecological approach. Now, what is this ecological approach? An approach which focuses on the environment factors to study cognitive processes in natural settings. Cognitive psychologists often collaborate with neuroscientists and computer scientists. Let's come to the another branch, that is biological psychology. Now, relationship between behavior and physical system, that is brain and our nervous system, immune system, and genetics. So, basically, biological psychology focuses on the relations between behavior and physical system. And now, physical system means your brain, your nervous system, your genetics, and your immune system. Biological psychologists often collaborate with neuroscientists, zoologists, and anthropologists. Neuropsychology. It's one emerging field now. Neuropsychology has emerged as a field of research where psychologists and neuroscientists are working together. They work together. And research is studying the role of neurotransmitters in chemical substances which are responsible for neural communication in different areas of brain, and therefore in association of mental functions. Now, we have neurotransmitters. They play a major role. These are basically neurotransmitters are the chemical substances. Now, they play a major role and they're responsible for the neural communication in different areas of our brain, and that is directly proportional to the mental functions. So, neuropsychology studies the role of transmitters or chemical substances that are responsible for neural communication in different areas of brain and mental function association. Now, they do their research on people with normal functioning brain as well as on people with damaged brain by following advanced technologies like EEG, PET, MRI, etc. Now, let's come to clinical and counseling psychology. Here we go. Okay. Now, clinical and counseling psychology as deals with causes, treatment, and prevention of different type of psychological disorders. Now, disorders like we have mentioned few here: anxiety, depression, eating disorder, substance abuse, and etc. A related area is counseling, which aims to improve everyday functioning by helping people solve problems in daily living and cope more effectively with challenging situations. Now, the work of clinical psychologist does not differ from that of counseling psychologist, although a counseling psychologist sometimes deals with people who have less serious problems. Now, in many instances, counseling psychologists work with students, advising them about personal problems and career planning. Like clinical psychologists, psychiatrist, like a clinical psychologist, a psychiatrist also provide counseling, okay, or the therapy we may say. So now the question emerges about the difference between a clinical psychologist and a psychiatrist. How are clinical psychologists and psychiatrists? They are different, because clinical psychologists, psychiatrists also study the cause, treatment, and prevention of psychological disorder. So how are they different? Here is the difference. A clinical psychologist has a degree in psychology, which I hope you can see here. A clinical psychologist is a degree in psychology, which includes intensive training in treating people with psychological disorders. In contrast, a psychiatrist has a medical degree. Psychiatrist has a medical degree with years of specialized training in treatment of psychological disorders. One important distinction is that psychiatrists can prescribe medication and give electroshock treatments, whereas clinical psychologists cannot do the same. So that's your major difference between your clinical psychologist and a psychiatrist. Now, the confusion between the field of clinical psychology and psychiatry occurs because both of them provide psychotherapy and both usually work together in many hospitals and clinics. Now, that is why many people get confused regarding the difference between the two. Well, they belong to two different groups of professionals and differ in their educational background as well as with diagnosis and treatment. Now, psychiatrists are physicians. After completing medical studies, they do doctorate of medicine, that is MD in psychiatry, and specialize in treatment of mental disorder. Whereas clinical psychologist holds a master degree, that is MA, MSc, and a doctorate degree, doctorate of philosophy PhD, or doctorate of psychology, Psych in clinical psychology. Now, because of this difference in training, clinical psychologists who do not have medical training cannot prescribe drugs to treat behavior disorder. Also, whenever there is a possibility of medical disorder, a patient should be examined by psychiatrists and other physicians. Moreover, mostly only a psychiatrist can refer a patient to a hospital for a treatment and care. Clinical psychologists carry out research to find out better ways of diagnosing, treating, and preventing psychological disorder. They also rely heavily on standardized tests for identifying the cause and these disorders. They use psychotherapy, for which they are trained for the treatment of medical disorders. But clinical psychologists are not authorized to prescribe drugs to treat behavior disorder, as they do not have a medical training. Also, they cannot refer a patient to a hospital for care and treatment. Whenever there is a possibility of medical disorder, a patient should be examined by a psychiatrist or other physician. So now we understand the difference between a clinical psychologist and a psychiatrist. Also, now about the biological psychology, we have discussed this well enough. Neuropsychology we've discussed. Good. Now let's come to social psychology. Now, as the word itself suggests, social psychology, it explores how people are affected by their social environment and how people think about and influence others. So it is about social environment and influence. So social psychologists are interested in such topics as attitudes, conformity, obedience to authority, interpersonal attraction, helpful behavior, prejudice, aggression, social motivation, intergroup relationship, and so on. So that's the social psychology. Now let's come to cross-cultural and cultural psychology. Now cross-culture and cultural psychology examines the role of culture in understanding behavior, thought, and emotion. And that's your cross-culture, role of culture in understanding behavior, thought, and emotion. It assumes that human behavior is not only a reflection of human biological potential, but also a product of culture. Therefore, behavior should be studied in its socio-cultural context. As you will be studying in different slides again, now culture influences human behavior in many ways and vary in degree. That will later on we'll discuss. Now, environmental psychology. What is environmental psychology? It studies the interaction of the physical factors such as temperature, humidity, pollution, and natural disasters on human behavior. How these physical factors they influence the human behavior. Now, the influence of physical arrangement of workplace on health, the emotional state, and interpersonal relationship are also investigated. So, current topics of research in this field are the extent to which disposal of waste, population explosion, conversion of energy, use of community resource, and human behavior. These are the current research topics that the environment psychology are focusing at the moment, and how they are associated with and a function of human behavior. Health psychology focuses on the role of psychological factors, for example, stress, anxiety, in the development, prevention, and treatment of illness. Areas of interest for a health psychologist would be stress and coping, the relationship between psychologists are stress coping, the relationship between psychological factors and health, patient-doctor relationship, and ways of promoting health-enhancing factors. Industrial or organizational psychology, that's one and the same thing. Industrial psychology or organizational psychology, it's again one of the emerging fields here, very important branches of psychology. Now, it deals with workplace behavior, focuses on both the workers and organizations that employ them. Industrial or organizational psychologists are concerned with training employees, improving work conditions, and developing criteria for selecting employees. For example, an organizational psychologist might recommend that a company may adopt a new management structure that would increase communication between managers and staff. The background of industrial and organizational psychologists often includes training in cognitive and social psychology. These are the factors that we have already discussed. Training employee, improve work conditions, selection of employees. Educational psychology. Again, one of the emerging fields. You see, it studies how people of all ages learn. So that's the focus of educational psychology. It studies how people of all ages learn. Now, educational psychologists primarily help develop instructional methods and materials. It develops instructional methods and material used to train people in both education and work settings. They are also concerned with the research on issues of relevance for education, counseling, and learning problems. A related field is school psychology here. That is a related field of educational psychology. Now, school psychology focuses on designing programs that promote intellectual, social, emotional development for children, also for kids with special needs. Now, they try to apply knowledge of psychology in school settings. Sports psychology improves sports performance, enhances motivation, and it's again a new field. Now, psychological principles we apply here and to improve the sports performance. Sports psychology is relatively a new field, but is gaining acceptance worldwide. There are other emerging branches here that we have discussed or mentioned: aviation psychology, space psychology, military psychology, forensic psychology, rural psychology, engineering, community psychology, women's psychology, and political psychology. These are the again other emerging branches of psychology. Now we have developmental psychology here. Let us discuss developmental. What is developmental psychology? Let us also discuss a bit about your education psychology. Okay. So as we've already discussed, that educational psychology investigates how people of, it focuses on how people of all age learn. It develops training material and methods to train. Now, if you want to brief that, educational psychology, it investigates classroom dynamics. It also investigates teaching styles and learning. It develops educational tests, evaluates educational programs, investigates all aspects of educational process ranging from curriculum design to technique of instruction of learning disabilities. Now, this branch deals with broader problem of increasing the efficiency of learning in school by applying psychological knowledge about learning, how to learn and motivate towards the curriculum. Now, as we've discussed, school psychology is a subfield of educational psychology. Now, school psychology, here psychologists, they do psychological testing, referrals, emotional, vocational counseling of students. They detect and treat learning disability, help improve classroom learning. The job of school psychologists include diagnosing learning difficulties and try to remedy them. Educational psychology may include school psychology, but educational psychology as such are usually involved with more general, less immediate problems. That means educational psychologists are especially concerned with increasing the efficiency of learning in school by applying their psychological knowledge about learning and motivation towards the curriculum. As there's again a very interesting branch, that is a forensic psychology that people keep on asking about is what exactly they do. Forensic psychology is nothing but basically they investigate problems of crime and crime prevention, rehabilitation programs, prisons, courtroom dynamics. They select candidates for police work. Forensic psychologists mostly work within the judicial system in such areas as assessing emotional and psychological state of under trials and victims. They also evaluate the rehabilitation program. They eyewitness the testimony and evidence. They do the jury selection and police training. So these are the basic work that comes under forensic psychology. Again, one of the amazing branches that we have discussed is positive psychology. That's again one of the emerging branches that we have. Now, positive psychology is an emerging field of 21st century. This field is defined as the science of happiness and human strength. Psychologists working in this field are concerned with the positive aspect of human nature, such as hope, optimism, passion, love, gratitude, forgiveness, humility, etc. They try to find out what makes a good life. The work of these psychologists overlaps with that of humanistic psychologists who have similar point of view. So these are the basic branches of psychology that we have covered so far. Now let's come to another slide. Developmental psychology, I'm sorry, we missed developmental psychology. Basically, developmental psychology studies the physical, social, and psychological changes that occur at different stages of our life span. It studies the physical, social, psychological changes which occurs at different ages and stages over a lifespan from conception to old age. The primary concern of developmental psychologists is how we become what we are. For how many years the major emphasis was on child. There have been, for many years, we have been putting major emphasis on child and adolescent development. However, today, an increasing number of developmental psychologists show strong interest in adult development and aging. They focus on biological, socio-cultural, and environmental factors that influence psychological characters such as intelligence, cognition, emotion, temperament, morality, and social relationship. Now, these developmental psychologists, they collaborate with anthropologists, educationists, neurologists, social workers, counselors, and almost every branch of knowledge where there is a concern for growth and development of a human being. So let us come to another slide. Here we will be discussing the psychology and other disciplines. Now, as we have discussed earlier, we have discussed a group of scientists from different fields have come together and jointly handle the problem, and this process is known as transactionalism. Now, psychology has, what is the relationship of psychology here with the other discipline? Any discipline which deals with people would definitely recognize the relevance of knowledge of psychology. Similarly, psychologists also acknowledge the relevance of other disciplines in understanding human behavior. Now, this trend has led to the emergence of interdisciplinary approach in the field of psychology. The researchers and scholars in science, social science, and humanities have stressed the significance of psychology as a discipline. And now later in the figure, we'll show you the figure. Here is the figure. This is the figure. Now this figure shows the relationship of psychology with other disciplines. In studying brain and behavior, psychology shares its knowledge with neurology, physiology, biology, medicine, and computer science. In studying human behavior, its meaning, growth, and development in a socio-culture context. Psychology shares its knowledge with anthropology, sociology, social work, political science, and economics. Now, in studying mental activities involved in creation of literary text, music, and drama, psychology shares its knowledge with literature, art, and music. Some of the major disciplines linked in the field of psychology that we have discussed here is philosophy, medicine, economics, political science and sociology, computer science, law and criminology, mass communication, music and fine arts, architecture, and engineering. Okay. So, here we go. This is the figure. Okay. Alright. Now, philosophy. Now, how is it related to psychology? Or how psychology is related to philosophy? Now, until the end of 19th century, certain concerns that are now part of contemporary psychology, like what is the nature of mind, how do humans come to know their motivations and emotions, were the concerns of philosophers. In the later part of the 19th century, Wundt and other psychologists adopted an experimental approach to these questions, and contemporary psychology emerged. Despite the emergence of psychology as a science, it greatly draws from philosophy, particularly with respect to methods of knowing and various domains of human nature. Now, medicine. Doctors have realized that the maximum or healthy body requires a healthy mind, and it is actually true. A large number of hospitals now employ psychologists. The role of psychologists in preventing people from engaging in health hazardous behavior and in adhering to the prescribed doctor's regime are some of the important areas where two disciplines have come together. While treating patients suffering from cancer, AIDS, and physically challenged, or handling patients in the intensive care unit, that's your ICU, and patients during post-operative care, doctors have also felt the need of psychological counseling. A successful doctor looks at the psychological as well as physical well-being of a patient. Let's come to economic, political science, and sociology. Now, the system of social science discipline, these three have drawn considerably from psychology and have enriched it as well. Politics, political science, economics, and sociology. Psychology has contributed a great deal to study of micro-level economic behavior, particularly in understanding consumer behavior, saving behavior, and in decision-making. American economics have used data on consumer sentiments to predict economic growth. Three scholars who have worked on such problems have received the Nobel Prize in Economics, namely H. Simon, G. Kahneman, and T. Schilling. Like economics, political science too draws considerably from psychology, particularly in understanding issues related to exercise of power and authority, nature of political conflicts, and their resolution, and voting behavior. Sociology and psychology have come together to explain the understanding of behavior of individuals within different social or cultural contexts. Issues like socialization, group and collective behavior, and intergroup conflict gain from both the disciplines. Computer science. Now, from the very beginning, the effort of computer science has been in mimicking the human mind. One can set it in terms of how a computer is structured, its memory organized, sequential and simultaneous read parallel processing of information. Computer scientists and engineers are seeking to make computers not only more and more intelligent, but also machines which can sense and feel. Development in both these disciplines have brought about significant advancement in field of cognitive science, law and criminology. Now, a skilled lawyer, or a criminologist require knowledge of psychology in answering such questions such as how well a witness remembers an accident, a street fight, or a murder. How well can she report such facts when taking the witness stand in the court? What factors influence the decision which is taken by the jury? What are the dependable signs of guilt and falsehood? What factors are held important in holding a culprit responsible for his or her action? What degree of punishment is considered just for a criminal act? Now, psychologists seek to answer these questions. Currently, a number of psychologists are involved in research such as these issues to answer, and which certainly will help the legal system of the country in the future. Now, mass communication. The print and the electronic media have entered in our life in a very big way. They have a major influence on our thinking, attitude, and our emotion. If they have brought us close together, they have also reduced the cultural diversity. Now, the impact of media on the formation of attitudes of children and their behavior is a domain where both these disciplines come together. Psychology also helps in developing strategies for better and effective communication. A journalist in reporting news must know the reader's interest in the story. Since most stories deal with human events, knowledge of their motives and emotion is very important. A story will be penetrating if based upon a background of psychological knowledge and instinct. Music and fine arts. Music and psychology have converged in many areas. Scientists have made use of music in raising work performance. Music and emotion is another area in which a number of studies have been carried out. Musicians in India have recently started experimenting with what they call music therapy. Now, in this way, they use different ragas for curing certain physical ailments. The efficiency of music therapy still remains to be proven. Architect and engineering. At first glance, the relationship between psychology and architecture and engineering would appear improbable. But such is actually not the case. Ask any architect. He or she must satisfy his or her client by providing mental and physical space through her design and satisfy aesthetically. Engineers must also take into account human habits in their plans of safety. For example, on street and highways. Psychological knowledge helps in big ways in designing all mechanical devices and displays. Now, to sum up, psychology is located at the intersection of many fields of knowledge pertaining to human functioning. Now, where are these psychologists? What do they do? Where do they work? How do they operate? Now, for this, we'll read psychology and work. Now, psychologists today work in a variety of settings where they can apply psychological principles for teaching and training people to cope effectively with the problems of their life. Often referred to as human service areas, they include clinical counseling, community, school, and organizational psychology. Now, we have clinical psychologists here. We have mentioned counseling psychologists, community psychologists, school psychologists, organizational industrial psychologists. Now, we'll go through each work one by one. What exactly they do? How do they operate? Now, what are their basic roles? Now, we covered clinical psychologists. What they do is they specialize in helping clients with behavioral problems by providing therapy for various mental disorders. In case of anxiety or fear or stress at home or at work, they work either as private practitioner or at hospital, mental institute, or with social agencies. They may be involved in conducting interviews and administrating psychological tests to diagnose the client's problem and use psychological methods for their treatment and rehabilitation. Now, job opportunities in clinical psychology attract quite a few to this field of psychology. Now let's come to the role of counseling psychologist. Counseling psychologists work with persons who suffer from motivational and emotional problems. The problems of their clients are less serious than those of clinical psychologists. A counseling psychologist may be involved in vocational rehabilitation programs or helping a person in making professional choices or in adjusting to new or difficult situations of life. Counseling psychologists work for public agencies such as, you mentioned here, mental health centers, hospitals, schools, colleges, universities. Let's come to community psychologists. Community psychologists generally focus on problems related to community mental health. They work for mental health agencies, private organizations, and state government. They help the community and its institution in addressing physical and mental health problems. Now, in rural areas, they may work to establish a mental health center. In urban areas, they may design a drug rehabilitation program. Many community psychologists also work with special populations such as elderly or physically or mentally challenged. Besides the redirection and evaluation of various programs and plans, community-based rehabilitation, that is the CBR. Here we have mentioned CBR. CBR is community-based rehabilitation, is a major interest for community. That's a major interest for community psychologists. Now, what do school psychologists do? They work in educational system and their role vary according to the level of their training. For example, some school psychologists only administer tests, whereas others also interpret test results to help students with their problems. They also help in formulation of school policies. They facilitate communication between parents, teachers, and administrators, and also provide teachers and parents with information about the academic process of a student. Okay, let's come to another field, that is organizational psychologists. Now, what do? They render valuable help in dealing with problems that the executives and employees of an organization tend to face in their respective roles. That means they provide organizations with consultancy services and organize skill training programs in order to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness. Some organizational psychologists specialize in HRD, that is human resource development, while others in organizational development and change management programs. Now, these are the basic psychology-related jobs that we have discussed here. And now we will, you can see, SAR therapists, consumer therapists, counselors. So basically, it's a wide range of options that you can opt for. And now we know the role. And now let's come to the slide. This is a slide where we have mentioned what are the specialties of psychologists, where they work, where psychologists work, and what they do. Now, we have taken this figure, and now we've taken this figure from the group. And as you can see, specialty in psychologists, you can see that they have clinical, 49% is the clinical, 10% is the counseling. Now, 5% is experimental, other research areas. 3% is the school, then industrial organizational, social and personality, developmental psychology, educational psychology, health psychology, and others. Now, we have covered all the specialty in psychology. And now, where the psychologists they work? They work, and 33% says they work in private practice, 30% says college and university, 12% of them hospital or clinic, 7% human services, business industry government, 8%. We are talking about industrial and organizational psychology. Then school, 4% school psychology, 8% others. And now what psychologists they do? What is their primary activity? 44% of them says 44% serve to the mental health services, 50% educational and educational services, 9% of management and administration, 11% research, 4% in applied psychology, 17% on other aspects. So this figure basically talks about the specialty of psychology. The percentage are obviously approximate. Now the psychologists where they work, diagram C tells you about the main activity, what they do at work. And any particular, this is again very important point, any particular psychologist might do several of these activities during the work week. As we can see, most psychologists specialize in applied area and work in applied settings. So that's it for this lecture 2. As we have discussed already, branches of psychology, the role, the branches of psychology. One by one, we have covered all the branches. Then we have discussed the psychology and the relationship with the disciplines. This we have discovered. Then we have also covered psychologists at work. Individually, we have discussed all the fields and the specialty, where they work, and what's their primary activity. And now, thank you for watching, and I hope you like and subscribe to the channel. And definitely, this will boost our confidence, and definitely we'll try our best to provide you with psychology-related videos. So please like and subscribe, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.